Okay, next item, please.
Next item is the third public hearing to receive input from the community on possible city council districts for district-based elections, including input on draft maps submitted. The recommendation is to hold the third of 4 public hearings on the possible transition to district-based elections, to receive public input on the configuration of the draft maps, and to provide direction to the demographer on draft map preferences and any proposed revisions.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you. We're very excited to be here tonight to hold the third public hearing in this process that we started last year in considering whether to transition to district-based elections. We've had a lot of activity, but I'll keep my part very brief. It's very much detailed in the staff report. We've had an excellent intern. She had to go home for the evening, but she has done an amazing job of outreach since January through April, at the end of April when we had the deadline for submitting the maps. So we do want to thank her for all of her work. I'm going to turn it over to Shalise Tilton from NDC, and she will present the maps that we have received from the public.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, and I'd like to echo Kelly's comments about your public outreach. It's been outstanding, especially in comparison to other jurisdictions we work with, and you truly have an engaged community, which is nice and reflective in the amount of maps that were received. Just to recap before we start getting into the maps, there are some federal requirements that we must follow. The main one is that we have equal population. This is based on the 2010 census. So it's based on total population as of 2010. When we're dividing into 6 equal districts, each district has to have 19,324. There is room for a small amount of deviation, but it's not to exceed 10% between the least populated district and the highest populated district. We received 21 maps from residents. NDC drew 2 maps to round out the options for a total of 23. 12 of the maps that were received were not contiguous or population balanced. And then there was 1 map that only reflected a single district, and there's 1 map that there's possible voting rights concerns. So if the council hones in on that map, then we will address that as we go through. So there are 9 fully legal maps that could be adopted in their present state. My suggestion would be that we start with the 9 fully legal. And then if you want to delve into some of the others to see what it would take to make them legal to adopt them, we can certainly go do that. Our goal is to identify some focus maps that hopefully, if you can get down to 2, that would be great. 2, 3, or 4 focus maps. That way it will help with our next public hearing, and the public is able to hone in on the maps that you are most considering. So as you go through the process, and after I do the quick presentation of the maps, we'll be asking council, and it's typically a good place to start with identifying the maps that you like. It seems to be a smoother process as opposed to going map by map by map by map, but we have council members identify the maps that seem to best fit the community. So if at the end of the presentation we want to eliminate the maps that are not fully legal, then that would be a starting point as well. So when we talk about some of the maps that are not contiguous are listed here. We did have a revised map 605. So 605B is a legal map. It just has a small tweak to where you see in District 6 that yellow block because that was non-contiguous with District 3. The tweak was to make it be part of District 6. It was 0 populated, so that was a very easy tweak, and so that is a legal map for consideration. These other maps, because they're not contiguous and that is a requirement of the courts, we wouldn't be able to adopt them in their present state. These are maps that are not population balanced. I do want to remark that it is a more difficult task than what it seems when you are going through this exercise. And we want to recognize the citizens that were engaged. There was a great amount of work that was put in by them, and they were engaged in the community outreach efforts as well. So certainly these maps can help guide your process, but if council is interested in one of these, there would be some significant tweaking that would need to take place. There's some others that are not population balanced. One of these maps, 609, I believe, 610, is close. So if 610 was one that the council liked, it has a total deviation of 14.5%. So if council truly liked 610, we could work with it and try to make some tweaks to make it population balanced. The others are too far out of population balanced. It would take a major overhaul. I mentioned we had one map that was a single district map. Those maps are useful for us and actually encouraged because we recognize that the individual submitting this map is familiar with the particular district that they drew, so that can help inform the council on the importance of that particular community. Map 606, while it meets all of the contiguousness and the population balanced, we have some concerns because of the highest citizen voting age population for the Asian American community is actually, we see a lower percentage than the other maps are achieving. And it's simply in the way that it's grouped in that District 1. So it's actually picked up two strong Asian American communities on both the northeast and the northwest, but in the middle it's included another community that has diluted the overall strength. So it was a little deceiving if you were just going by the concentration map, and it resulted in a lower percentage for the Asian American voting bloc. Now, if we hear from the Asian American community that this makes sense and there's reasoning for it, then that could be a compelling reason to consider this map. Otherwise, we may, if you like this map, we may suggest that we look at it and see if there's ways we could modify that to make sure we're not dividing that community. Now we start the maps that are legally viable. We're not necessarily going in numerical order. At this point, I can tell you the map numbers that are legally viable. And they are maps 601, 603, 605B. We mentioned 606. That's the one that has the lower of the Asian American citizen voting age population. 611, 614, 615, 616, 620, and 621.
Would you be kind enough to give us those numbers again, please?
Yes. 601, 603, 605B, 611, 614.
Okay, hold on. 611. Okay, what's the next one?
614, 615,
615 or 16?
615.
Okay.
616, 620, and 621. All of those could be adopted in their current state without any tweaking. All the maps that I list, and I do need to make some clarification. I understand that an updated summary sheet was distributed to council. On that sheet, the addresses used were from the council roster. One of those addresses was not a residence address, it was a business address. So when we're talking about on the summary sheet that was distributed, we're talking about the pairings, those will change. So we will get a new summary sheet. It was just called to our attention just minutes before this meeting that that one of the addresses was a council business address and not a council residence address. We need to use the residence addresses when we're talking about pairing council members. But the good news is with that correction, is that most of the maps presented do not pair council members who are eligible to run for office again. Because the city has term limits, there are only 3 of the current seated incumbents that are able to run for office again. So in establishing the goals, there were a variety of goals that the council identified. One of those is to respect voters' wishes and to avoid pairing council members where possible. So it turns out it was very easy to avoid pairing council members. There are actually only 3 that pair council members, and as we get deeper into it, I can discuss which 3 those are. 2 of them happen to be the NDC maps, and those can be very easily adjusted. In fact, I was just sketching it out here. It's a very easy fix that will not affect the population deviation. And that's maps. So I'll go ahead and tell you which ones pair council members. 606 pairs council members. That's the same one that has the concern with the Asian American population. I did not just read it in my fully legal ones, but it's 606. And then 614 and 615 pair council members. It's an easy fix to not pair council members in that it's only moving about 337 people and won't affect population deviation. Okay, so let's get into the legal ones. And as I mentioned, they're not in alphabetical order because we've grouped them into maps that have similar features. We had one map that represented kind of horizontal districts, and this is map 603. We have on the website our map submitter comments. I can just quickly read what those comments are. Those who want to look them up further, they're available on the website. Map 603 actually was submitted without comment. So map 603, but it's clear that we believe it kind of follows a horizontal pattern in its configuration of the districts. There are several groups that had each of the districts meeting in the center. So we've grouped these in categories. Meet in the center groups is what they call them. In fact, most of them, I believe all of them, may touch I-80. So all 6 districts at some point touch I-80, I believe, in all of the maps in this category. So map 601 was submitted by a resident, also without comment. Map 605B was submitted with the comment that the submitter believes it makes sense because it follows natural divides among the geographical areas. And neither of these pair any of the 3 eligible candidates that are eligible to run would be able to run in the next election, their next election cycle. Map 614. 614 is one that was submitted by NDC. So 614 was drawn to comply with all the legal requirements to respect communities of interest as much as possible, to follow major roads and other easily identifiable borders as much as possible, to be compact as much as possible. And it was originally drawn to avoid pairing council members with the discovery of that address. This particular configuration does pair council members, but it's very easily fixed. So it pairs council members in District 2. So that the fix is to take the Blue Rock Springs Corridor Park area and move it into District 1. So that's that little tiny triangle at the very peak of the pink District 2 in map 614.
Yeah.
So that would make it so that no council members are paired. 614. So District 2, that very top little peak, that's the Blue Rock Springs Corridor Park area. That census block would be moved to District 1, We'd likely move a couple small, tiny census blocks next to it just to make a cleaner line. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. We have some
I
real
apologize.
confusion with the way this map came out.
Okay.
I apologize,
ahead.
Mayor. I just handed out 614 because it all is a screenshot of what we just looked at earlier that's on the spreadsheet on the interactive map. And so I wanted to make it wider, and that shows your addresses so you can orient yourselves. And I'll do the same thing with 615. So 614.
Okay, could I look at that? There was a glitch with 614 just during the meeting that I discovered and had fixed.
Yeah.
It just got fixed minutes ago.
Sunga is
Yes, this is wrong.
in the wrong place.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I will bring, I have the ability to disregard that. Yeah, as I was sitting here, I found a glitch and 614 was the only one that had the glitch, which is just coincidental that would be the one that you just fixed, that you just printed. The one on your screen here is correct. The one printed on the website is correct. The interactive map viewer where you can zoom in and out, I'll show you what that is. It works like Google Maps. That one had the error in it that we just corrected. But so this is correct. This is a correct map, but we would ask it not be considered in its present form, but rather that peak at the top of District 2 we moved to District 1, affecting about 330 people, 337 people. Well, we can zoom into the interactive map if that's the desire. Map 620 was submitted with very lengthy comments. Map 620, the submitters actually call this their unity map. It was submitted by 6 individuals with special assistance from the Asian American Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus and the Mexican American Legal Defense Education Fund. They also took previous submitted maps as their guide when they created this map 620. I'll just highlight a couple of the comments, but the written testimony is a couple pages long, and it does go into detail about each district. The Unity map now recognizes previously unconsidered social demographics while staying within the constraints of drawing the district lines. Moreover, the Unity map takes under so Unity map is map 620. Takes under consideration the general plan update, which includes the specified opportunity areas in all districts with the exception of District 6, which is Southeast Vallejo. The map also incorporates the input of the community with regard to housing, economic development, and health issues. The submitters conclude that its district lines optimally preserve the communities of interest in Vallejo. And we'll make that written testimony available on the website if it's not up there already. And this map 620 does not pair any of the three the 3 incumbents that would be eligible to run after their election cycles are completed to run for a new term. The next category or the next grouping, we kind of combined into maps that represented a very strong west district and a very strong center district. So map 611 was submitted with no comments, and map 615 is one that was drawn by NDC. It is a revision of map 614, and it actually had one pairing of 2 council members, but I believe yes, it does still have one pairing, but it can actually be easily adjusted to that same peak around the Blue Rock Springs corridor could be moved to District 1 without impact on the population deviation. It was drawn to be follow major roads, meet and easily identifiable borders as much as possible. That's map 615. Continuing with the strong West District and strong Central District are maps 616. Map 616 does not pair council member three of the three eligible incumbents. A district map, the submitter's comments state a district map for consideration that is from the perspective of the African American community of Vallejo. The African American community is spread out and diverse in Vallejo, and our collective interests include equal and equitable access to economic development, education, housing, county services, and public safety. Each of the 6 districts that we created all touch I-80 and are in close proximity to heavily populated and traveled streets and interstate highways in Vallejo, such as I-37, I-29, Sonoma Boulevard, Broadway Street, Spring Road, and I-780. That is map 616. Map 621 was submitted without comments. At this point, what we typically do just to help start the conversation is NDC has looked at each of those maps, and we took the 2 groupings, the one grouping where they all meet in the center, and the other grouping that has a strong West and strong Central District, and we've suggested 2 focus maps. These are merely just to start the conversation. So we suggest map 614 with the tweak to the Blue Rock Springs Corridor Park to move it to District 1, and then map 621. So at this point, we would hold the public hearing and then discuss the current draft maps. Hopefully, we could select 2 to 4 as focus maps. If there are any of the maps you want revisions to, now would be a time to give us direction so that we have them ready for your next meeting. I can bring up the interactive map viewer so that we can zoom in closely and see streets and where divisions are. We actually have now corrected the location of that one business address, and we've corrected map 614. So with that, I can answer any questions the council desires.
Okay, Kelly, do you have something more you want to say? Nothing? Okay. Before I take comments from council, I'm going to open the public hearing. I have a series of speakers cards, and I'm going to begin with Ryan Masano. Ryan Masano, you're not in the audience. Alexis Smith. Alexis Smith. Paul Armentano. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Armentano.
Thank you. Good evening. It's getting late, so I'll try to be brief. I emailed each of you individually some longer comments, but I did want to speak publicly on the record on this issue because I think it's a very important one facing Vallejo. I am a Vallejo resident and voter, and therefore I'm very concerned that the push for districting in Vallejo did not spring up organically. This was not inspired by the voters of Vallejo. This is being pushed upon our city via the threat of a lawsuit by an out-of-state group that does not necessarily have the best interests of our city in mind. While I can sympathize with the desire to achieve greater inclusion among our city council candidates and among the members of our city council, I am incredulous that amending the way we voters select our elected representatives from an at-large election to district elections is going to address this matter. We also heard a lot about accountability tonight, and I'm very concerned where the accountability would be if we do make this change, and years later, the makeup of the Vallejo City Council is not particularly different than it was in the past. Who is going to be accountable then? Rather, I fear that moving to district elections is going to offer voters fewer candidate choices than they have now. Post-districting, I think it's likely that the number of potential candidates in certain districts will be overrepresented, while in some other districts, the number of potential candidates voters have to choose from are going to be underrepresented. In some districts, I fear candidates may in fact run unopposed, giving voters who reside there no choice at all in their representation. Vallejo has city-wide problems that need to be addressed. That was on full display here this evening. I'm very concerned that by electing candidates to the council who are more potentially beholden to the representatives in their individual district rather than to the needs of this overall city is only going to permeate the divisiveness that we are seeing in our city. We have pressing issues that need to be tackled, and that means we need unity among those in the council. I am afraid that by going to district voting, we are going to be electing members of this council who are putting the interests of their district before the interests of this city. Under the present at-large system, candidates seeking office must actively engage voters throughout the entire city of Vallejo if they want to be elected. This outreach is a good thing. This is a positive thing for Vallejo, as it provides candidates with broader perspectives of the issues facing this city, and it makes candidates more aware of the divergent opinions of the voters in Vallejo. By contrast, district voting will result in less campaigning by candidates, interactions with fewer total voters, and ultimately elections may be won by candidates who receive a disproportionately small number of votes. Vallejo needs competent representation now more than ever. Why would we consider lowering the standards necessary to achieve public office in this city? In closing, I encourage members of the council to give serious consideration to the potential unintended consequences that may result in district voting, and to instead contemplate potential alternative options that may also boost inclusion, such as potentially increasing the total number of council members from 7 to 9, before moving forward with a final decision. The way we Vallejo voters decide upon who sits up there should not be decided by an out-of-state group in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mina Diaz. Mina Diaz, not in the audience. Mark Fox. Mark Fox. Liat Metzenheimer. Oh boy.
Good evening. I want to first say that it's a little bit concerning because we did have a number of people that wanted to speak at this public hearing, and when we had the confusion that happened at the beginning of the meeting, they were told by the police department and by security that the council meeting was canceled and that there would be no further meeting, so people went home. So we didn't have the opportunity to have the input, the full input that we would like to have had people known that if they would have stayed around that they may have still had opportunity to speak to this issue. And it's really important that we have as much public input as possible for you to consider the district elections and the maps that were submitted to you. So I'm hoping at some point there's going to be some way that the people who were not able to speak would be able to submit information to you and that they would have given to you tonight. We do want to make one change on the staff information. It says that 620 which is what map I'm representing this evening, was submitted by MALDEF, and it was not submitted by MALDEF. It was processed, the map was processed by MALDEF. It was submitted by Voices of Vallejo. We had 2 community meetings. We had 2 trainings that we did. They were open to the public. We had a very robust conversation. We gave the information about why we're going to district voting, what the rights issue for the state of California was, and we had a good round amount of people, for diverse people that were there for the training. We also had people who didn't like the idea of district voting, but by the time that we became into the conversation that they participated, they have changed their mind. So I think the more that you give information to people to kind to relieve some of the fears that they have about what happens at district voting, the better that you'd have participation. So in the packet that we gave, we actually submitted a 13-page packet, and it had more breakdown on there other than just the map. It also gave some statistics on there. These are things that the community wanted to look at and that we talked about in consideration of our mapping. So there's more than just demographics. We talked about infrastructure. We talked about historical districts, neighborhoods, and next door mappings that are already submitted as a community interest. We talked about the general plan update, which was very important because this is the first time in 30 plus years that we've had an update, and South Vallejo, North Vallejo, and Central Vallejo all have opportunity zones, and we wanted to encompass that in our mapping so that we made sure that those areas would have representation, because too many times we have projects that happen in certain areas of the town, and people will make decisions on it without real input from that community. So it would encourage people to participate in the elections, talking to the candidates so that they are fully aware of this person is aware of what their neighborhood is about, who the people are that live there, and what the issues are. We also took into consideration health issues. We have more fully developed. There's another about 5 pages that we have submitted that showed areas for economics, for health issues, voter population, environmental issues, and we also talked about where schools are located. So there's a lot of input that we got from the community members. We had about 60 people that participated in the 2 trainings, and we tweaked our first map and came up with a unity map because we also incorporated some of the ideas that Mina Diaz had in her map that she had originally submitted. So we're hoping that you look at our map. It is truly a unity map in that we had opportunities for various organizations and groups. We took it out to neighborhood association meetings, and we also talked to different people in different meetings to give them the opportunity to have input in the map. And we have not received any that came back to say that they didn't like the map. The first meeting was held in Union Baptist Church, was sponsored by the African American Alliance. The second one we had at Ascension Church that was offered by 2 other groups. Thank you.
Before you leave there, Ms. Metzenheimer, you said that the map that you have given us was not produced by MALDEF, but it was produced by
The information was provided by the community. The map was processed by MALDEF.
Oh, okay.
But it was with community input.
Okay.
It's map 620.
620.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm looking at. Thank you. Okay, next speaker, Ann Carr. Okay, not in the audience. Kathleen Diep. You'll pass? Okay. Okay, Ann Carr. Your timing is perfect if you wish to speak regarding district voting. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, let me catch my breath. So I had left chambers when the police had announced that the council was over. So this is highly irregular. And I understand that we had an unusual evening with a lot of unexpected or maybe somewhat expected excitement. But having the police tell everyone to go home and then continuing the council afterwards really deprives citizens of a chance to participate. So I was trying to listen from home where audio is spotty on the new council system. You can't hear it with Firefox. But let me fast forward here. I finally switched over to Safari and heard someone talking about how they thought at-large elections allow for a greater voice in the community, and I just could not disagree more. I think district elections give the possibility of neighborhood candidates to come forward without the burden of having to carry the financial considerations of a citywide campaign. And as we know from the last election, I believe one of the council members spent $154,000 on a campaign. 60,000 of it was his own money, and then had the backing of Jumpstart, which was arguably another $100,000. So a $250,000 campaign. That is an unattainable goal for most citizen candidates. So I am completely behind the idea of district elections. I think no system is perfect, but I think it's going to give the opportunity for other types of candidates to come forward, and then it's just a matter of how you draw the lines. I had submitted a speaker card for tonight because I saw this district map that you guys had as a hard copy at the back of the chamber, and it looked like someone had drawn districts to make sure that all of these city council members would have a chance to run again, which including some bubbles that were, intruding into other districts, so they weren't observing natural neighborhood lines. So I could not argue more strongly against that kind of gerrymandering. The whole point of this exercise is to be more inclusive of groups that have not been represented at council. And with respect to Vallejo, specifically the large group that isn't showing up is the Hispanic American population, which is an increasingly large population in Vallejo. So that population in particular needs to have representation, but also the west side of Vallejo in general does not have representation, mostly on the council. And I firmly believe that if South Vallejo had representation, then some of these more-abound projects like the VMT Orson proposal would have been dismissed long ago. So I encourage the council to continue on the whole prospect of district elections. There is the potential of a lawsuit hanging over us if we don't. And let's make sure that the top priority is not to ensure that existing council people get their own safe little district, but in fact that we have population balanced districts that include populations that have not been represented before. And if we do that, I think we will have the strongest Vallejo. So please apologize for my comments being somewhat unpolished here. I was racing to get down here once I knew that council had resumed. It's a very irregular format to send people home and then restart council. I think that's very problematic. And I know you guys were grappling with what to do, but you shouldn't send people home and then keep on going with your business. That's very bad form. Thank you very much.
Hey, Ms. Carr, before you leave, I just want to let you know there was probably some miscommunication that was made. We had intended to keep the council meeting going, so apparently it wasn't communicated properly. My apologies for that.
Well, it was communicated by police officers who presumably are representing the city. So they said, go home. And there were a lot of them here. And I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. It looks like trouble. So I know there was anger and excitement and all that sort of thing, but that the communication was poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the last speaker's card. I'm going to close the public hearing, open it up to council discussion. So Don, could you reset the screen for me, please? My screen. Oh, boy. Yeah, look at that. Yeah. Oh, wait. Let's try this. Yeah. Oh, too much. That didn't work either. Greg? We have a hiccup here. Nope, that wasn't it either. Too many buttons to push here. We'll just keep hitting buttons until it works. There we go. Okie dokie. I think we got it. And just keep pushing buttons until it finally comes on. Make sure this is right. I have begin with Councilmember Brown. There you go.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor. I guess where do I start? I think for me, first off, I know you said that I have some real concerns about whether there was real public input on this. To a certain extent, I feel like the public has been bamboozled by this. I know that there was a lot of community outreach in different areas of Vallejo, saw a lot of the same people, led by the same group at every meeting, pushing the same thing. A couple of meetings that I did go to, me and Councilmember Sunga were at the senior roundtable, and the seniors almost had a riot behind this. I have heard from multiple parts of the community that are either under the impression that this is a done deal or that it is being pushed upon us unnecessarily. And I think that that is a concern of mine. Is I think we still have a decision to make last time I checked. And if we don't, then, what are we? Are we city council members or are we puppets? Because I don't feel that there has been enough done to show that, hey, there's decisions that we can make, yes or no. Is this what's best for us? I understand people don't want to be sued, but if that's the case and we can be bullied and every time someone threatens to sue us, we have to go run and hide, that's a problem for me. I was just elected. I was elected by 23,000 people who told me that I need to vote with my heart and not just be cowered into making decisions because once they know that you can be bullied, you'll be bullied again and again and again. I know that I was looking at this thing where it says African American Alliance was involved. African American Alliance did not endorse this. I was at a meeting, the last African American Alliance meeting, where it was spoken of in the sense that it was a done deal and that council only had to approve it. That's a lie. That's not true. The NAACP, which I'm a member of, has not endorsed this. There are serious concerns in minority communities and senior communities, all type of communities, about whether this will have the effect that people want. In theory, it's good. We do want to see diversity. In a segregated city, it makes total sense. In a diverse city where everyone is spread out, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It does not. As we just had a speaker say, we just had an African American run and win big. And so now you want to take that process away because we are so diverse. And there is no concentration of African Americans. We are all over the place. So in effect, if we broke this up, you would actually have a situation where half of the city would be in elections, the other half would not be motivated. A minority candidate would then have to bend to the will of whatever district he's in or he or she is in, regardless of regardless of where they're at. I think that is a big problem. For me, I think that this could be a Pyrrhic victory. It could set this city back 50 years. What if, I don't want to be part of something that we make the wrong decision on and maybe 20 years from now, we don't have the diversity that we have now, currently. I've heard that those concerns voiced in the Filipino community as well, with the fact that we are so diverse. So how do we make sure that minority candidates here can get elected? Last time we talked about this, I asked the city attorney to look into Santa Clarita, and I asked, have you spoken to the city attorney there? We didn't speak to him. I don't understand why that would be. If you're doing the job. That's gross negligence. I can't say enough. If you're representing the city and a city actually beat the case or beat the person who was suing them, same people that are suing us based on their diversity, why aren't we looking into what they're doing? Why haven't we spoken to the city attorney's office? Why does this feel like this is being railroaded without community input? And quite frankly, I mean, just because someone may sue me or sue us does not mean that I should do the wrong thing or that we should do the wrong thing. I think that there were a lot of people who wanted to speak, and there was going to be a lot of people who were going to speak against this project. And I think that it would behoove council to make sure that we listen to everyone and make sure that are we voting because we're scared, or are we voting because we want to see diversity? And does this plan bring the diversity that we want? Does it? Thank you from the audience, but I don't think it does. Right now, we have a pretty diverse council. Currently, one thing that a speaker brought up that I would agree with is right now, every council member has to be held accountable to the entire city. So if we had districts, and let's say someone wanted to put some kind of carcinogen that'll kill a community in North Vallejo, what would stop the rest of that council from saying, you know what, we're not going to be held responsible in North Vallejo for what we put there, so we're going to vote it in there? That is a serious concern for me. I've heard people say that people are concerned because we don't want to be in the same district. I could care less. I will run in any district as my numbers show. I'm not afraid to run anywhere, quite frankly. So that's not it. But I am concerned about the future of my community and making sure that we do have representation from all over the community, that we are now not actually, though in theory we wanted to create diversity, we're actually taking it away. Like I said, I just feel that this thing is being railroaded. I don't like the process. When I hear people talking about it from city staff, I hear them talking about it that it's a done deal. I have no clue why we have not looked into the city attorney's office in Santa Clarita. It would have took 5 minutes to call them. If I would have known that no one here would call them, I would have called them myself. But I didn't know that was my job. And so I think we owe it to the rest of the city to do our due diligence. I don't think that we can be led by a small group of people trying to manipulate the system and pretend that they speak for everyone, because they don't. It was brought up specifically at the NAACP meeting that this would not create more minority candidates. We're too spread out. And that's the best thing about Vallejo. This isn't Concord where you have segregated areas. This isn't some other cities in Southern California where it's segregated. This is a community where we're all spread out. So, like I said, I think that I think the council needs to think very long and hard about, will this achieve diversity, or are we just running scared, and are we being led by our nose? I mean, I feel like we are being pushed by a lot of forces, but I'm not happy with the fact that we have not looked at other opportunities. Last time I checked, I'm supposed to be presented with opportunities, not one, and saying, hey, you better do it or else. And we haven't even checked into anything else, because then we're being railroaded. We are no longer in charge. And that is the perception of the community, that we are not in charge, and that needs to change. I don't think this process has been transparent. There's, like I said, most of these people, most of the community is not at the table. Seriously, and wouldn't support it. So that's it. One more thing. Are we making a decision tonight?
No, we're not. This is the third public hearing. We still have third of 4.
Okay.
So we have one more.
Well, I would like to ask the city attorney's office again to please look into Santa Clarita, talk to the city attorney's office, do your due diligence, please, or I'll do it. I'm doing it on $1,000 a month, but I'll do it myself if I have to, because someone needs to do their due diligence. So please look into that. I would like a full report. And like I said, if the city attorney's office does not want to do it, I'll do it myself. But I don't like the feeling where I am being railroaded. I do not like the feeling that we are being bamboozled and pushed and pulled and using our fear against us. It will not accomplish what we're hoping for. In theory, I agree. I want to see more diversity. In the segregated city, that makes total sense. In this city, it actually does not make a lot of sense. Like as the speaker said, I've heard people say, and before I got on council, that we need to break up the Filipino vote. That was the first time I heard this talked about, was we need to break up the Filipino vote. From so-called liberals who are so-called progressive, we need to break up the Filipino vote. And so here we are, and I have serious concerns about this. I'm done.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney, do you have a comment?
I did. I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Brown's previous request of my office that we comment on the situation in Santa Clarita. I am sorry that I didn't more readily give this information today to you. But I would recall that several months ago when you brought this issue to my attention, that is, what is the situation in Santa Clarita, I did do the research and I forwarded it to you, and that is that Santa Clarita had a very unique situation. And in Santa Clarita, they were also sued by Kevin Shankman, and as a result of a plea bargain, that is the only situation that I'm aware of where Santa Clarita was able to hang on to their at-large system. I did also consult with NDC, who was going to give you additional details on the situation in Santa Clarita. But I can re-forward the results of my research that I did several months ago to the entire council, so that the entire council is aware of the situation. One other thing I would say is that the city attorney in Santa Clarita is actually not an appointed city attorney. It's actually, or not an in-house city attorney. It's a private city attorney who bills the city of Santa Clarita every time he picks up the phone and answers. And so although I have reached out to that person has not reached back out to me. At your direction, I will continue to reach out, and perhaps I will get an answer, but that is one of the reasons why you don't have a reaction immediate from that person. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. With that, I was going to turn it over to our consultant, with whom I've talked about this issue, who is, I'm sure, able to give you further details about the situation in Santa Clarita.
I have just a very short summary. I understand your desire for a full report. Let me give this short summary, just maybe that will help provide a little bit of clarification on Santa Clarita. In 2015, Santa Clarita reached a settlement to use an alternative voting system known as cumulative voting, and $600,000 was paid to the plaintiff's attorney, who was Shankman. This is in addition to the approximate $650,000 paid to Santa Clarita's own attorney. Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Terry A. Green initially approved the settlement, but reversed course after the California Secretary of State questioned whether cumulative voting was legal in the state. To date, the Secretary of State has not reversed his opinion about the legality of cumulative voting in the state. We believe that this is an outlier. It was a fluke settlement. It's our understanding that Mr. Shankman believed that the fallback would be, if they couldn't do cumulative voting, that it would revert to district voting, to by-district voting. That's not the way the actual settlement language read, however. So when Mr. Shankman sued the city of Mission Viejo, he made sure it was very clear that if their alternative voting method failed, it would go back to the court for a settlement and ultimate by districts.
So a follow-up question is, what current voting system does Santa Clarita have now?
They currently have an at-large system and are currently subjected to another CVRA lawsuit. They haven't been served with a lawsuit, but they are vulnerable to a lawsuit. So you're back to the same position. They're back in the same position.
And what were some of the reasons why the judge did not rule in their favor to just say, no, you have to go into districting?
Because the settlement was just for cumulative voting, which is but the Secretary of State believed that the statutes do not exist to allow cumulative voting at this present time. So that settlement did not work for them.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Meisner.
Thank you, Mayor. So, this, I'm somewhat in agreement with the comments from Councilmember Brown. We are being forced into doing this, and I don't like being forced into doing something. I'm also very pragmatic, and I don't see how if Santa Monica couldn't prevail, I don't see how we could, and I don't want to spend $5 million to find out. But it's very frustrating that we went from the odd year elections, and I got elected by 7,000 votes in 2013, roughly, and this time around I got elected by 18,000, so that's 11,000 more. I came in second place both times with 11,000 more votes. So it feels to me like we are intentionally going backwards to a voting system where very few people elect a person. But I also do think it does cost a lot of money to run, and the media is getting very expensive. Everything's getting expensive. So it would help. Some people would never have the ability to run. So, there's different ways to look at it. And when it comes down to it, I just don't think we would prevail in a lawsuit. I'm not a gambler. So I also, one of the questions I did have, though, I sort of feel like this particular attorney is abusing the Voters' Right Act. He gets paid. So Santa Clarita just paid him $600,000, and they're still vulnerable. And so I'm hoping that maybe our state legislators might look at this and see that maybe something needs to change. And if that were to happen, could we actually go back to at large? What would that take? Would that take it wouldn't take a chart. Is this going to change our charter?
No, this just would be an ordinance. And so if the possibility is there that the CRA Act changes to allow for at-large elections, then only the ordinance that will be considered at a later point would need to be repealed.
Okay. So there's opportunity to go back. Anyway, but since we are here and we're looking at the maps, one of the things I was concerned about, and I should have made my own table because looking at all these different things, I was concerned about too much of having too much concentration of the city's wealth in one area, or homeowners versus renters. Because the more wealthy people tend to vote more, the homeowners tend to vote more, and so that might make it difficult for, I think, a certain area to get, like somebody else said, even one qualified candidate. And so, what happens if nobody in a district if there's nobody who wants to run? That could be a possibility. Because this past time we only had 5 people run, so that's not even enough to fill our districts.
Well, I'm sure Shalitz can speak to that, but there are vacancy provisions in the charter that would kick in, and just like now, if there's a vacancy that's unforeseen in the council, those vacancy provisions would kick in, and the council would appoint someone. Mm-hmm. How that appointment would work would be spelled out in the ordinance.
Yeah, so that's another consideration that we probably don't want to talk about tonight because it's almost midnight, but that's also, so if somebody in a district, so it's a 4-year term, and now, so in 2022, if it were at large, and say I couldn't serve the rest of my term, 2020, and I decide in January 21 I can't serve the rest of my term, so the next highest vote getter from that election that just happened would fill my seat, the way the charter reads. But in a district election, so it would take a council appointment, which, that's open for whatever, gerrymandering, whatever, the future can hold anything. You never know who's going to be elected and how those people might choose things. And so it's just I know there's something we can do about it now, but I just want to put a seed out there that these are things we need to consider in our ordinance going forward. And with that said, I want to talk about the maps, and I actually did like NDC's number 14 and the MALDEF, but 14 doesn't. It combines 2 council members, and MALDEF doesn't, and it's very similar. And I like the fact that it has, I say MALDEF, but I should say Voices of Life. It sort of retains this one district from map 612. That's a little longer and skinnier, but and that doesn't have that little jag on the edge. But you know, it's nicely divided, I think, based on all of the criteria. I mean, it was very well thought out, frankly. You know, the criteria that they used, and I know my neighborhood was hoping to stick together because Vallejo Heights is traditionally from 1978. It was a neighborhood identified by the city with redevelopment, and so it's always been kind of a nice gelled area. So, and that's retained. And I like that 80 goes, everything touches 80. I particularly don't like the maps that are striped. That kind of feels like, you know, a little bit too much, just so different. Anyway, it's getting late, so those are my comments about the maps. Thank you. But I do like, my favorite is 620.
Okay. Thank you. Vice Mayor Dew?
Thank you, Mayor. So, you know, I echo everyone's frustrations about whether or not going to districts is actually going to accomplish the goal of getting, you know, representation on the council that represents the diversity of our community. But, you know, the reason that this ability to sue us exists is because of a state law that we have no control over at the city level. I did speak to Senator Dodd and Assemblymember Grayson, and they both told me that there is pending legislation, or somebody was carrying a bill that would change the current state law. Do you guys know of any pending legislation?
There's several pieces of pending legislation, and it's all very fluid right now. So they are getting revised and changed. So most of them look to strengthen the CVRA and make it so that it's more mandatory.
Yeah, exactly. So are there any that look hopeful?
I don't know that answer. We can check and
I can check
if we're closer to getting a more solid legislative update.
Yeah, or even the ones that are looking to be more restrictive and more mandatory. I think that's also if they're making their way through committees, we should know about them also. And so, you know, for me, I feel that spending millions of dollars on something that is not going to be successful and at the end of the day is not going to change the state law is not in the city's best interest. Not to say that I'm afraid of litigation. We clearly take on litigation quite regularly in this city, much more than we do in most cities. So I don't think that by saying we're going to move forward with this process, that we're admitting defeat. I think that we are saying this is what it is now, and the proper way to fight it is with the state that is putting this onus on us to begin with. So, you know, sending letters in support of any pieces of legislation that would allow us to be more at large, I think would be great. And opposing any legislation that is more mandatory and more restrictive would be great also. As far as the maps go, you know, for me, it's hard to imagine what they are going to look like, you know, when they're actually in effect. So it's, I like that 80 is touched by every district. So I think that's important since Caltrans is, you know, operating right through the center of our city. We all need to be able to have an influence on that. And I think at the end of the day, there's, you know, some of the concerns are valid that that some individual is going to just represent their district and they're going to fight everybody else. But at the end of the day, we can't move forward as a council unless we all have a majority agreement. So, if each person is just fighting for their district and fighting everybody else, we won't move forward, and nobody will get reelected if we're not moving anything forward. So, I think that the fears are valid, but I think that there's checks and balances in place that'll help with that. So, so I'm fine with the 2 suggested focus maps. I'm also fine with map 620. It just seems like a lot of District 3. District 3 just looks really large.
On which one?
620.
20.
Yeah, it's just the land. Yeah. Well, and we have proposed development too, but yeah, so I would be fine with those 3 maps as our focus.
614, 620, and 621. Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Verderliga.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay. So our task tonight is to give you a list of maps that we would, to recommend you 3 or 4 maps, correct? Okay. So tell me the difference between 614 and 615. Can you expand that map?
We can actually overlap the 2.
Oh, okay. Because they're almost similar, except that.
Yeah, they are similar. It's overlapping is a little bit difficult.
Okay. Well, we can do it one at a time.
You can see, if you just focus, say, on District 1, just as an example, right now you're looking at 614.
Okay.
When I overlap 615, you can see that there's just slight changes in that District 1 as I toggle back and forth. Just very slight.
I see. All right. So we are discussed earlier.
So,
2 council members.
And it's not just District 1, there are other changes between the 2 as well.
You're going to make that change on that little pocket there. Is that what you're going to do?
My recommendation would be for both map 614 and 615 that if you're inclined to adopt one of those, it seems to make sense with very little population impact to move that area around the Blue Rock Springs Canyon corridor. I can circle it with the cursor right here.
Would that be Tennessee, Oakwood? Would Tennessee be the main cutoff?
Let me
Locust Drive.
Let me zoom in to this. I'm going to go ahead and turn on census blocks, and I'll show you why. And then I'm going to zoom in more closely. So this particular block right here is actually where the census block where you reside. So the proposal would be to move this to District 1. We'd also likely, we'd need to move this District 5 so that we have census block that only has 5, the population of 5 in it with that. And to round out, we may want to take these 2 just so that the map has smoother lines.
Okay. All right. So you'll round that up like that.
And if that would be a good time, if everyone agrees for both map 14 and 15, for us to present that option,
okay,
including this census block that has 43, 121, 5, and the 250. Is it 258? The angle I'm seeing is
Temple Way, Hillview, Terry Brook. Okay.
Yeah, 288. Mm-hmm.
Where is Evergreen Way and Masonic?
I'm sorry?
It's up there. Just curious. Okay, so my other question is 620 is something else I'd like to look at. That's one of the focus maps. I put 620, map 620, because I remember meeting with the group at the Norman King. I saw this map being presented, and I remember the folks that were put in a lot of time putting it together. So that's map 620. So 620, 614, 615, and 601 is interesting. So as 621.
There's 601. And if you'd like, would you like me to show 621?
Yeah, 621.
Okay.
I know that, Vice Mayor Pippin do.
That one's 601, and then here is 621.
I would still be separated from, I won't be in the same district, correct?
I believe in this.
I'm by Oakwood.
I believe in this district, your seat is in District 3.
So my follow-up question is on your map of 620. It says, and it's probably going to be...
Yeah, it's District 3.
On 620, it says proposed elections sequencing, so that's just a proposal.
Yes, once we get down to the focus maps, I'll be asking, or actually at the end of our discussion, I'll be asking for general direction from the City Council to look at the proposed sequencing, make sure that if it's possible to match the eligible seated incumbents with the same election cycle as the districts, and then to and then for the other seated candidates, it often makes sense, or if there's a direction for the council, to try to give one of your higher protected class groups. There should be one 2020, at least one 2020 district that would be vacant if you'd wanted to assign that to one of the districts that has one of your higher percentages of your citizen voting age population. Right now, your Asian American community is your highest citizen voting age protected class group. You have good representation for the Asian American community, so that could be a consideration. So it'd be council's direction on if you want to provide that guidance.
Okay, so I have 614, 615, 620, and 621.
I'm sorry, 614, 15, 20, and 21? Okay.
Just to clarify, it's with the tweaks that we discussed, correct?
Yeah, you have with the tweaks that we had mentioned earlier.
Okay, so they'll be identified as 614B, 615B.
With the census block.
Yeah, that. Yeah.
Any other comments?
Thank you, Mayor. That's
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sunga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the same concern as Councilmember Brown, and from the beginning, I have bad feelings about this because we work so hard to have a diverse council, and it's working. We're diverse, and I'm afraid that if we go to a district election, that may reverse the trend, and that's very, very possible because there's no concentration of Asian Americans in Vallejo. They're all over. So my concern is today, especially my questions to the city attorney, has not been answered to this date. And one of those questions is, what is good and bad on redistricting in the city of Vallejo? What are the pros and cons? That's a very fair and easy question, and it's hard for me to decide if I don't know the goods and the bads of a project, and that's important to me. especially what Councilmember Brown said, that there's some people who are using this to divide the Filipino votes. That's not good. We have to decide on this based on what's good for Vallejo, not to divide the Filipino votes. And I'm more bothered now than before on this redistricting because of that. But I'm also concerned that this being pushed to us. The city of Vacaville, before they start doing anything, the city council voted for a district election, and then they started doing all these things. We're doing the other way around. If we're being told that we still have to vote on it, and we're doing all these things already, to me, it seems to be the reverse. Because we are asking our citizens to spend a lot of time on this when we still don't know if it's going to pass. I would rather vote on it than we work on the other details after we approved it. I think that's what makes sense to me. So my worry is that it's going to be shoved to us, and they said that hey, we don't have enough time. We have to vote on this, just like what happens on so many occasions to the council. But I have my concerns still, and my concerns aren't answered to this day. So, okay, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Before you comment, Councilmember McConnell has not commented yet, so I'm going to allow him to go first. Then you, Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hold on just a quick second. It appears that the city attorney has a comment she wishes to make. Go ahead, please.
Just very briefly, I wanted to direct Councilmember Shunga's attention to actually the second public hearing staff report, which contained a section answering your questions. And I'll be happy to provide that again to you and to the rest of the council. Additionally, we actually have pretty much copied the majority of the staff reports for Vacaville. We're actually following Vacaville's templates. Like us, Vacaville began their process by adopting a resolution of intent to move to district elections, and that is how this council directed me to begin this process. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on City Attorney's comment, by the adoption of the ordinance, we at least go into our safe harbor protection mode, and we can stay there for a while. If there is a change in legislation, and some of it does occur this term, it would be effective January 1 of 2020, and we could rescind any action we may take under this procedure as well at that time. The irregularity of how the public was disrupted this evening and the disbursement of information about whether the council was going to continue or to not continue does cause me some concern. I do note that we had 6 cards, and 4 of whom did not appear and speak. 2 did, one of whom went home, watched it, and really realized we were going ahead after all and came down here. The purpose of tonight is to sort of narrow the examination period. And rather than commenting on a whole lot of things which I would otherwise do, because I know we still have one more complex matter and it's already after midnight, let me just say that the maps that I would prefer that you would take a look at are numbers 605B, 606, 611, 616, and 620. There are a couple of points in those maps that I see that do cause me some concern. In particular, some of those maps lump the California Meadows area way out in northwest Vallejo, all the way down onto Mare Island and even into somewhat into South Vallejo. It's like a Z shape on some of those maps. And I believe one of the considerations is that it was supposed to be contiguous and it was supposed to be connected through commonality. I'm failing to see the commonality of that type of a pattern on that particular district. And what I witnessed in the map procedures where I did attend was that people had very adamant ideas about certain areas that they wanted to see done. And then after they've done that, in order to be in compliance with population balancing, they squeeze other areas to make them fit. So if you want to come back with some variations on these suggested maps, I think that's something we should look at also. It's a little difficult to look at all of the many maps, particularly on the written page, because some of those maps have indications of where streets are and some of them do not. So maybe if we could print those maps on a landscape approach rather than a portrait approach, it might be better. I tried to look at where I would be in which district, although I'm not going to run again anyway. But sometimes I couldn't figure out whether I was in one district or the other, at least based upon this particular rendition. Given the fact that we are under the current law that we are under, and given the fact that the city is under such financial demands and pressure at this point, I believe it would not be prudent to say damn the torpedoes and full speed ahead and fight this matter. Because even if we win, we lose. And the expenditures of funds would come out of the general fund, which is already severely impacted. And as a prudent spender of the public purse, I have a very hard time justifying such a decision. It's been said that democracy is an experiment. Well, this is an experiment. And if it doesn't work out, and if it doesn't work out in other cities, I'm sure the legislature will address those concerns and probably alter the law. Even if the state alters the state law, we still have to look to the federal law, which would not be altered. And under that, we're probably almost equally as vulnerable as we are under the state law. So given those parameters, I have to be more inclined to support the moving ahead at this time of the district election concept. And as was once said, the devil may be in the details, so when we get down to drawing block by block by block, I'm not sure we'll be in such agreement, but I think we need to proceed. I am concerned as to when this fourth hearing will take place, given the fact that so many people had to leave this evening, and we have such a complex, heavy calendar anyway. So what I would request is that when the fourth hearing takes place within the time parameters that are available to us, that we try to have it either at a special hearing or that we put it on a night where there's very little else on the agenda. And that may be a difficult task with the approaching of the budget sessions and the appeals that we are about to address ourselves with. But I know we can fit it in somewhere, and if it's a special council meeting, I think that might be a prudent thing to do. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to thank my fellow council members. You all brought up some very good points. I like what Councilmember McConnell said, that, a worst case scenario, if legislation does pass, we can always reserve the right to change it. But I did want to bring up a couple things. I know someone had mentioned that, it can't be every person for themselves, but no matter how you divide this city, there's going to be some very natural allies if there's districting. And I'll tell you, it'll be income. High income areas will tend to band together against low income areas. I don't care how you divide it. East Vallejo Hills, Hidden Brook, the Vistas, Glen Cove. Point of order. Excuse me, ma'am. We didn't interrupt you when you were talking, so please don't do that again. Please. No heavy breathing and no talking while someone else is talking. I really would appreciate it, because when you were talking, I let you talk.
Councilmember, thank you. Your point's well taken.
Thank
but
you.
Ask the audience to kindly respect the right of the speaker as we've respected yours. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as, an example, if all of these different divisions, for the most part, there are certain areas that working class families live in, that poor families live in, and they're not a majority. So there would still be a majority of high income areas that would overrule low income areas. Right now, if poor communities have some concerns, they can hold all of us accountable. In the future, with districting, if poor people have concerns, they will be outvoted. And that is the honest to God truth. That's the great thing about our system is we all can be held accountable by the entire community. If South Vallejo doesn't like something that we did, guess what? Someone's going to pay for it. So if North Vallejo, if East Vallejo, but I see some very natural allies, and we all know as people who have walked these areas I could see they're developing some serious issues. And I think, secondly, do we really think most Vallejoans know what's going on or are involved in this process? They're not. Like I said, it just feels like a fast one that's being pushed through really fast. I know for a fact there's a whole huge parts of the community that do not know what's going on. And just because you roll a few people out for nice pictures and it looks diverse does not mean that all parts of the community are at the table. Call me crazy, but when human beings start creating maps and coloring maps, everyone has their own biases. I mean, my concern is whether it's human error or just outright gerrymandering, I'd rather see some type of how do we divide this city equally instead of people with their own interests dividing it, especially democratic groups, strategic groups deciding this. Look who's pushing it strategically, period. And I'll tell you, man, I don't want to see my city lose any more money, but I will say this, we've already lost tens of millions of dollars. And none of the things that we've paid money out on is worth working class families having a seat at the table. And I know even if we win, I think someone said if we win, we lose. I disagree, because if we win, we have just protected the voting rights of working class families and poor families and people who are not at the table. And you know what? I will eat that because I personally want to be remembered for doing a good job. I do not want to go down in infamy as a council, and part of a council that changed how we did things and it backfired on us. And it was all obvious. If, like I said, the biggest thing is, and it's a strong consideration, is money and the fact that this is hard odds. I was talking to a friend of mine. Everyone's, if I was a gambler, then I wouldn't have ran. Insurmountable odds. You fight for the right things and you turn out. Sometimes you win. But when we don't fight for the right things and we just kind of turn in, then where do we end up? And like I said, it doesn't take a genius to point out the holes in this system and why we should be very, very concerned about how we move forward. I will take it upon myself to look into more of the legislation to find out, what is out there, because this current system, I'm not satisfied with it, and we all were elected by, there's a silent majority out there that is not at the table, that most of them do not know what's going on, and the ones that we've spoken to would not approve. I wish everyone would have seen the senior roundtable. Seniors who voted their whole lives, who vote in every election, were up in arms and did not understand the system. So I would definitely caution us moving forward. And like I said, unless council tells me any differently, I think we have a decision to make. And I hope that people, whenever we make that final decision, give this a real serious thought, because we're talking legacy here. We are talking possibly taking votes away from communities. We are talking about this diversity we see up here now could disappear. When I hear, like I said, the first time I hear it, it's coming from strategic groups talking about breaking up specific ethnic demographics. And now here we are, and the same people are now pushing this. That's concerning.
Thank you. Councilmember McConnell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The comments of Councilmember Brown caused me to consider some additional thoughts, and I would like to explore the feasibility of some of those thoughts with you. He raises an interesting argument over household income. We're looking at ethnicities and population numbers under the Act. Does that Act require us to examine any other factors other than population, similarity in numbers, and ethnicity?
So actually, the Act itself, the California Voting Rights Act, does not address how maps are drawn. But it does give some guidance for redistricting and says that the council may take into consideration communities of interest. So communities of interest are just as you identified, things such as household income, renters versus homeowners, that type of, those all are communities of interest. We do have the demographic data for each of the maps that identifies several of those categories that identify communities of interest. So when you're looking at the demographic summary that's attached to each of the maps on the website, and I believe in your packet, you can see if there's a stronger percentage in one particular category. That's often an indicator that that's a community that is like-minded or shares similarities. So if you see, say, a higher percentage of renters in one district, that could be an indication that that particular district shows that has a strong community of renters that may share same interests, and that could be a compelling reason for drawing that map the way it was drawn. So those help guide us in selecting our maps. The only rule is that race cannot be the predominant. The federal law. Now we're talking federal law requires that race cannot be the only factor or the predominant factor. That's why it's important that we use, it can be a factor but not the only factor and not the predominant factor. That's why it's important that we look at the neighborhoods and what the shared interests are in those neighborhoods.
So if we zero in on that phrase, commonality of interest under the law, it seems to give us a wide breadth of additional factors which we are permitted to consider and not forbidden to consider.
Correct.
So I would like to actually see some development of statistical information in each proposed map on household income. Renters, I think, is already in there. I'd maybe like to see it broken down better in terms of whether these are high-income rental units or low-income rentals, whether they're in complexes or separate houses. The phrase commonality of interest is an interesting phrase, and it does seem to provide us a wide breadth of license to reveal different factors. So when we look at these revised maps that we are narrowing down, I think I would like to see what you could offer in addition to statistics rating the population and ethnicity and renters versus non-renters, including household income, maybe cost of housing units, employment versus unemployment statistics. It'd be interesting to get some additional factors to help guide us to what might be a better resolution. Thank you.
Okay, before I call on Councilmember Verder Aliga, I'm not going to accept any more comments from council regarding this. I think we've really discussed it into the ground. We still have one other action item, and I apologize to Mr. Callahan and his staff that we are way into this. I would also like to indicate to staff that for the next hearing, that we either do a special meeting or we do it on a calendar that we have purposefully kept light, as this is definitely going to take a lot of discussion. Regarding the speakers that were not able to speak, I would highly recommend that we publicize that we will be doing this again, and that there were speakers that didn't get a chance to speak, and we should invite them to return to say whatever it is they wish to say regarding this issue. Councilmember Verder Aliga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, I did not mention earlier that I'm still on the fence on this issue, whether to redistrict or stay at large. And I echo the comments of my colleague, Councilmember Brown and Councilmember Sungat. So I just wanted to say that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to conclude with my comments. And those are that this is a very difficult decision for all of us. There's a lot of passion involved in this. I too am fence sitting regarding this issue. I'm very uncomfortable with being told by a group of folk that this is what you are going to do, and not doing it in a way that quite frankly to me is in the best interest of the city of Vallejo. Conversely, however, I am concerned about subsequent lawsuits. I would like to see why Santa Clarita did whatever it is they did, and there's an email out there that I need to read in its entirety because Ms. Quintana, I think you sent that sometime in February or March, but I'm going to research it, so I'm going to stop with that. Okay, I do agree with what Councilmember Brown, Sunga, Meissner have said, as well as the Vice Mayor. However, what I'm going to be looking for is any pending legislation that might move this in a different direction. I too have spoken to Senator Dodd and Assemblymember Grayson, and have expressed my frustration with what this is doing to the city of Vallejo. We are very diverse, and I truly believe that our diversity is such that districting should not apply to our community. That being said, however, the ask tonight was to give you direction on where we should go with these maps. I'm looking at map 620 and 614 as the two maps that I think are the most applicable. The areas that I was most concerned about were on the backside, and that talked about the deviation from ideal. That was very important to me, and the percentage of deviation. I looked at age, language spoken, household income, and housing status. And those two fulfilled those areas that I was most concerned with. So that being said, what is the pleasure of council? I don't believe there was an action. No, there is no action on this, as this was a public hearing. So,
yeah, actually, we need to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we would like to know if there's any we want to outright eliminate. If you want to eliminate the ones that are not legally viable, not eliminate them, but the way that we would do it is we would ultimately identify the focus maps and then put previous drafts. They'll all stay up on the website, but it will help the public if you narrow it down and maybe you're ready to choose the focus maps. I'm going
to interrupt you. I think we've done that. I think everybody has said the maps that they want to see on there. So let's just use those and we'll dump the others.
If I could just run down them really quick, maybe that's easier.
Sure.
It's 605B, 606, 611, 614, 615 with the tweaks we discussed.
Right.
16, 620, and 621. The rest would be eliminated.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's just one clarification I wanted to make on the timeline, because I know this is a long process. The next hearing is currently scheduled for June 11th. The requirement under the statute is that the next hearing be within 45 days, which is why we picked that hearing date. There would be no vote at that hearing either. Once we had that fourth public hearing, whatever we decide as far as maps goes, we would come back July 9th to introduce the ordinance. That is the vote point. That is the yes or no point. That would be July 9th.
That date again is what?
July 9th.
July 9th.
And then that would be the introduction. If that passed, then we would have adoption July 23rd, which would be in time for our extension that we negotiated of July 31st. So there really isn't a lot of flexibility with the statute and with the extension.
Okay. And again, I'm asking that we make it very clear to the public that they are invited back to make their comments, and due to an unforeseen circumstance, they didn't get to. And I would invite them to come back to make the comments that they wish. Madam City Attorney.
Very quickly, the clerk tells me that she has released a special date of June 18th. So I don't know if that fits better within our guidelines, but we will certainly look at what the schedule looks like, everyone's availability, and that may be something that we do to accommodate the public.
That was June 18th.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.